Hello everyone, today is 2nd of February, now it's about 10:30 in the morning Moscow time. I'm Levan Gudadze and this is my first update for the day in which I'll share all the main news that are making headlines in Russian media outlets and Russian language pages on different internet platforms. Later on today at 6 o'clock Moscow time, I will start a traditional Sunday live stream or community chat, and I hope you will find time to join the conversation, exchange of opinions in real time. I will let you know some 10-15 minutes before live stream starts about the stream through community page on YouTube and also through my Telegram and Twitter X pages. That's being said, dear friends, let me also ask you to click that like button and leave some commentary. It is very important to deal with the algorithms. So yes, please, if you can, while watching or listening to this update, help me with the likes and comments. And well, let's start the news update itself. And first of all, I will report about developments in the Suja, Kursk region, borderline area of Kursk region, which is temporarily occupied by Kyiv regime's forces and NATO mercenaries. And well, unfortunately, Kyiv regime committed yet another war crime yesterday. The Kyiv regime's forces, with obviously NATO assistance, launched HIMARS missiles to strike a school in Suja, and already Kyiv regime is attempting. This was a bloody provocation, and almost straight away Kyiv regime start blaming Russia for this strike. Obviously, this is an attempt of Kyiv regime to divert world community's attention from atrocities that Kyiv regime troops and NATO mercenaries committed in temporarily occupied areas of the Kursk salient. Although Russian armed forces actually track path of the missiles, they notice missile launch. Even I saw this morning video when these HIMARS missiles were launched. Unfortunately, at least some of them managed to hit this school. I guess some missiles were intercepted by Russian air defense systems, and the Russian side has all the evidences, as far as I understand, to prove that this was yet another bloody provocation and the war crime of the Kyiv regime. At this point, it is unknown how many civilians were killed as a result of this strike, although as early as September, by the way, Russian high-ranking officials, including Russian representatives in UN, were saying about concentration camps that Kyiv regime was creating in the Kursk salient area. And one of the concentration camps were according to information for that time, from 70 to 100 civilians were kept in captivity. One of those concentration camps was exactly in that school that Kyiv regime targeted yesterday. Well, I'm quite sure outside the Western world, no one will buy into this Kyiv regime's propaganda that it was Russian armed forces that targeted this area. But yet again, information itself once again demonstrates with whom we are dealing. These are mass murderers, terrorists, and unfortunately they are backed by NATO countries, and they have all the means they need to continue massacre of civilians. Russian civilians, Ukrainian civilians, they just don't care. They just don't care. And as long as they have all the support they need from the West, I guess they will continue, or at least before Russian armed forces will finally exterminate all of them. When it comes to Kursk salient, by the way, obviously I reported about it before, and I will just remind you that when Russian troops, obviously there was many war crimes and atrocities that Kyiv regime's forces and NATO mercenaries committed. And for example, when Russian troops several weeks ago liberated the Ruskaya Porечная settlement, dozens of civilians were found. There are dozens of civilians that were killed, tortured by Kyiv regime's forces. In Russian custody at this point are a number of military personnel of Kiev regime and NATO mercenaries that during the interrogation acknowledged their involvement in atrocities against civilians, and also many of them are stating that they have direct orders to kill Russian speakers, to harass Russian speakers. And that's what they did. Many of them. I'm not saying that all of them doing these atrocities, but they are part of terrorist organizations. So all of them, everybody who cross Russian border in the Kursk salient area, in the Kursk region, all of them are guilty of the war crimes that are authorized and committed by Kiev regime and its forces, right? And the Russian security services, law enforcement agencies will track down every single one of them, no matter how long it will take, but all of them will be tracked down and brought to the justice. When Russian armed forces will finally, and security services will finally liberate Kursk salient area, which might happen in about 3 to 5 weeks' time, I'm afraid there will be more instances. Russian security services will find out about more instances of atrocities that Kiev regime's troops and NATO mercenaries committed. Potentially hundreds of civilians were tortured and murdered by Kiev regime and NATO in the Kursk salient area. And I'm saying so because unfortunately at this point, according to Vzгляд newspaper, 2,000 people are still missing in areas, from the areas that are temporarily occupied by Kiev regime. No one knows the fate of these people. Hopefully many of them managed to hide somewhere and survived there, but it is highly likely that hundreds of people from these missing individuals are already tortured and killed by Kiev regime. RT meanwhile is reporting that White House wants Zelensky to hold the election, according to Reuters report. Let's go through this. Let's see what this whole story is about. So Washington wants Kiev to have presidential and parliamentary elections potentially by end of this year. Reuters reported on Saturday, citing President Donald Trump's special envoy for the Ukraine conflict, Kat Kellogg. According to the report, Kellogg and other White House officials have discussed asking Kiev to hold the votes as a part of potential truce deal with Moscow. Speaking to the agency, Kellogg said that both the presidential and parliamentary elections need to be done. And then quotes here, most democratic nations have elections in their time of war. I think it is important they do so. He is referring to Kiev regime. Their special envoy said, I think it is good for democracy. That's the beauty of solid democracy. You have more than one person potentially running. Parliamentary and presidential elections in Ukraine scheduled for October 2023 and March 2024 were not held after Vladimir Zelensky announced in December 2023 that they would not take place while martial law imposed during the conflict with Russia remains in force. Martial law itself was declared after the escalation of hostilities between Kiev and Moscow in February 2022, and well, that is quite stuff to unpack here. First of all, Kellogg is talking about democracy in regards to Kiev regime, which is, after this, you cannot take Kellogg seriously, by the way. You cannot take seriously anybody that mentions democracy in regards to the so-called Ukraine, right? It's just nonsense, total nonsense, right? And if anybody refers to Kiev regime as democratic regime, sort of, is either fool or tries to fool everybody else, right? So that's one big mistake on part of Kellogg. What democracy you are talking about, man? I said yesterday, every time this speaking individual opens his mouth, he's saying some creepy stuff that makes possibility of ceasefire even less and less possible. So I don't know, maybe Trump should remove him from office, because he's definitely not the person that can deal with this situation. He's just not a person for this job. That's first of all, right? Secondly, well, it is worth noticing that Trump and his inner circle seems like are acknowledging that there is some issues with legitimacy of Kyiv regime, right? And Zelensky. And if they really are pushing for presidential and potentially parliamentary elections in Kyiv-controlled territory, okay, that's a good stuff. Credit should be given when it's deserved, right? So if they really want elections to be held and ruling class there to have some legitimacy, okay, that's something positive. But yet again, according to reports that I see, Trump's administration is pushing idea that this election should be held after ceasefire is achieved, which is, these two topics are contradicting each other, because Russian high-ranking officials stated quite many times that there will be no Russian armed forces will not stop conducting special military operation. Russian security services will not stop conducting counter-terrorist operation in Kursk salient area, even if some sort of negotiations begun, because everyone understands that there is Moscow can trust no one, right, when it comes to collective West, and obviously Moscow cannot trust Kyiv regime. So therefore, it is obvious that our thinking is that any ceasefire will be used by NATO to reorganize and reinforce Kyiv regime. So therefore, we had too many examples, right? Too many examples when West broke its own promises, its own agreements. So therefore, there can be no ceasefire until final agreements are reached, right? And the Russian high-ranking officials were very clear on that. So therefore, there is some contradiction here. If Trump's administration wants Kyiv-controlled territory to be run by legit forces, legit elements, then they should push elections now, because they know perfectly well Russian side will not stop, because Russian side cannot trust any of them, right, in the West, or anybody in Kyiv. Also, by the way, according to this reporter, White House is pushing for elections to be held before end of or towards the end of this year, which means that they will not really try too hard to achieve a final agreement in upcoming few weeks or upcoming few months. Western ruling class seems like still are not ready to acknowledge that they lost this proxy war that they were waging against us, against Russia, right? So they still are not ready to acknowledge that they lost her, and therefore they are still pushing this war to continue. Because why we are waiting for end of this year? Because you know perfectly well, Russian side cannot negotiate with Zelensky, let's say, right? Because he is not legit. And the Russian president in many occasions said so. A few days ago, that was the last time, isn't it, that he mentioned that Zelensky himself, he might be present on negotiation table, he might participate if he wants to, or if West wants him to be there. But Zelensky, because he is not legit president, cannot sign any agreement, right? Russia wouldn't accept that, because he is illegitimate president, and whatever he is signing is illegitimate. That's why Zelensky right now cannot even undo his own decree, which prohibits negotiations with Russia. Any negotiations, by the way, that might happen between Moscow and Kyiv now will be legitimate based on current legislation of Kyiv regime itself, right? And Zelensky, because he is illegit so-called president, cannot undo his own decree, because that will be illegit also. So for Moscow, it is very important every step to be conducted according to law, right? So therefore, quite confusing report from Reuters here, because recently we learned that Trump gives some 3 months or 100 days to Kellogg to come up with solutions for Ukrainian crisis, and seems like we're not gonna see no solutions or no incentives from Washington, not in next 3 months, not in next 6 months, not in next nine months, if they want elections to be held before end of this year, because Russia can negotiate only with legit representatives of the Kyiv regime, right? And these legit representatives might be created only after elections. Simple as that, isn't it? So I don't know, man. As I said, more this person talks, this Kellogg, more confusing it is becoming to understand what Washington really wants and in which direction Washington is pushing, really. Do they have any understanding, really, at least for themselves? They might not be ready to, talk to public about some ideas, but do they have any understanding how this conflict should be resolved for themselves? It seems like they have no idea about it, right? They have no idea. Trump definitely needs more qualified people, by the way, and Kellogg and many others in this administration definitely are not up to task. It's just too clear, man. And don't believe me, by the way, believe independent experts in US. Colonel McGregor, by the way, seems like quite upset and shocked by certain appointments that Trump made, right? Same goes for many other experts in the US and the West in general. But anyways, we will see. We will see what is going to happen. Zelensky, meanwhile, stated that after he will meet with Trump, time will come to start negotiations with Russia. Yet again, statements that are contradicting each other in many ways, right? So Vladimir Zelensky said in an interview with their AP news agency that he plans to start negotiations with Russia after meeting with US President Donald Trump. After the conversation with Trump, we should move on to certain format of discussions with the Russians. I would like the United States, Ukraine, and the Russians to sit down at the negotiating table, and who cares what you like, please? What would you like? Zelensky, you are not legit president of Ukraine. You have to go home. That's it, man. One of the preconditions from a legitimacy standpoint, one of the preconditions, any talks, serious, meaningful talks to take place, is Zelensky to be removed, right? Because he is not legit president. So it is what it is, man. At this point, by the way, as time goes by, Zelensky and his camp probably are realizing more and more that they are finished. They all are finished, right? And their position they may start talking little more sensible things. They might start talk about negotiations and peace more and more often, but yet again, Zelensky prohibited any negotiations with the Russian side, right? And now, when he is illegitimate because he did not hold presidential elections, he cannot undo his own previous decisions. So therefore, he cannot be presented on any negotiations at all. As a party, side, as a side, right? As a guest, maybe, I don't know if it is very important for Washington or London, Zelensky to be presented whenever some negotiations will take place, but he definitely cannot sign anything, right? And by the way, when it comes to truce or ceasefire, Kellogg also, according to reports that I see, this Trump-Kellogg's plan is to first achieve ceasefire and then hold the negotiations. Russian side was very clear, isn't it, that for any meaningful talks to begin, Kyiv regime has to withdraw its forces from LPR. Kyiv regime still controls 1 or 2 settlements in LPR. Kyiv regime have to withdraw forces from DPR, from Kherson and Zaporozhye regions, obviously from Kursk salient area, right? Once Kyiv regime would withdraw its forces from these areas, Moscow will consider that Western ruling class is really serious about de-escalating, and some meaningful talks may start after that. But as long as Kyiv regime troops are presented in these territories, by the way, there can be no meaningful talks whatsoever, right? And the Russian president himself stated this not so long ago. So also important nuance there. Anyways, dear friends, let's continue. And TASS news agency is reporting that Russian armed forces liberated the Krymske settlement in a DPR. This information was confirmed by Russian Defense Ministry. Let me show you Krymske on the map. So this is Kherson sector. Obviously, we all know that Zaporozhye sector, South Donetsk sector, then Pokrovsk sector, Chesovyar, Kupiansk sector, Kharkov, and here Kursk salient area. So let's go through this settlement. This is Novo Vasilievka that is liberated. I reported about it yesterday. And where is there? What is the name of this settlement? Krymske, right? Krymske in a DPR. So let's find Krymske. By the way, I'm not an expert in geography of this territory, isn't it? Yes, that's it. On the northern side of Toretsk, by the way, this is Krymske settlement, which is under full Russian control. And when it comes to Toretsk itself, I'm quite sure before end of next week, Russian Defense Ministry will make announcement that Toretsk settlement is liberated. Let's continue with some more news. LRT is reporting that yesterday's Russian long-range missile and drone strikes were targeting military and logistics infrastructure of the Kyiv regime, including energo infrastructure. And according to reports, gas infrastructure was significantly damaged. So the Russian military has launched a wave of strikes on Ukraine's gas energy infrastructure. Defense Ministry in Moscow has announced in a statement on Saturday. The ministry said that the group strike was carried out overnight and targeted facilities supporting operations of the Ukrainian military industrial complex. Their objective of their strikes has been met. All design targets have been hit, officials said, without providing some specifics about what facilities were exactly targeted. Also, by the way, we have update from Defense Ministry on situation in the Kursk salient area, according to which since the beginning of invasion, Kyiv regime's forces and NATO mercenaries lost more than 56,500 military personnel. Soon this number will reach some 60,000, I guess. Just give it another week or two. And Kyiv regime still is Kyiv regime and its NATO backers still are trying to hold on to some certain areas there. And that means more and more, another 5 to 10,000 troops of Kyiv regime will be, and NATO mercenaries will be sacrificed in that direction, most likely, if not more. RIA Novosti is also reporting that Russian armed forces conducted a long-range missile strike on a point of concentration of foreign mercenaries. This happened in Odessa, by the way, when Russian, I believe, Iskander missiles strike Bristol Hotel. Yesterday I shared on my Telegram channel and Twitter X page this video and also this photo of this hotel that was actually hit. Let me turn off the sound here. So this is their hotel, by the way. This is direct hit on it, and according to reports, yes, foreign mercenaries, all NATO troops, all NATO specialists are designated as foreign mercenaries, isn't it? So according to reports, by the way, NATO military personnel was housed in this hotel, and I guess they suffered this group of NATO specialists suffered some significant losses as a result of this strike. We don't have precise information now, but in upcoming days probably we'll learn some more about this. Meanwhile, and my guess is that it was a British, most likely British military personnel, potentially French military personnel, although on Military Summary channel yesterday I saw Dima reported that there was some Norwegian contingent there. Maybe, I don't know, I was not there obviously, but all the sources are reporting that this hotel was housing some NATO personnel, right? Disguised as foreign mercenaries or whatever. RT meanwhile is reporting that Germany rejects Trump's military spending demand. So quite understandably so, by the way, because Germany is just not in a position to increase defense spending up to 5% of its GDP. Just Germany cannot afford this, right? And barely any other country in Europe can really afford that. In reality, statements may be made, but reality is quite often very different than statements of officials, isn't it? So German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius has said that Berlin simply cannot afford to spend 5% of its GDP on military, as US President Donald Trump is demanding from NATO member states. The need to invest more in defense is undisputed, but there are limits to what Germany can do, Pistorius pointed out in an interview with the Tiger Spiegel newspaper on Saturday. He explained that 5% of Germany's GDP would correspond to 42% of a federal budget. That would be almost every second euro spent by federal government, or 230 billion euros. We would neither afford that, not spend that. He said the competition for ever higher percentages distract from actual issue at hand. It is crucial that we explain to our citizens what threats we face and how then the best possible way to protect ourselves, the minister argued. Well, I can help you with that. German public, main threat the German public is facing coming from German so-called elites, right? German government is a main threat for German public, German citizens, and more and more people in Germany are waking up and realizing that that's exactly the case. These puppets of Washington and London are the main threat, right? They are destroying Germany, German's social fabric, German's economy, right? They are criminals that actually allow the industrialization of Germany to happen, main economy in Europe, right? So it's not that difficult to understand who real enemy of German people is. And those enemies are actually put in position of power in Berlin by Washington and London. That's what it is, man. That's what it is, right? Let's continue. And RT is also reporting that Russia slumps UN chief over Holocaust remarks. Moscow has condemned remarks by UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, which omitted mention of the Red Army's role in freeing the inmates of Auschwitz, as well as the Soviet Union's sacrifices in defeating Nazi Germany. Guterres spoke on Monday to mark the anniversary of their concentration camps liberation, and well, unfortunately this is a trend, by the way, in the West, right? And the Western ruling class, their puppets, including this Gutierrez, by the way, they all are involved in faking history, right? Actively, and they are doing this actively. Russian delegation was not even invited, by the way, when there was ceremonies to in Auschwitz to commemorate memory of the older people that suffered from hands of Nazi Germany. And even though it's Soviet Union that liberated these camps, liberated these people, by the way, from these camps, I mean, Russian delegation was not invited, which is, first of all, insulting for Poland, I will say. It's just, it's insulting, by the way. I mean, if I was Paul, I would say, you know what, there might be some political issues between the sides, but history is history, right? And it was Soviet Union that liberated these people. It was the Soviet Union that played a crucial role in defeating Nazi Germany, and therefore, obviously, as to stay on a moral side, you have to acknowledge this. And unfortunately, Polish leadership is so degraded, so degenerate. Nothing to be said about leadership of other NATO member states, that they are actively trying to ignore Russia, ignore the role of Russia and Soviet Union. Anything positive that was done by Soviet Union is forgotten in the West. At this point, I would not be surprised if some large-scale studies conducted in Europe and in US, in Western world in general, and if majority of people, especially young generation, would not even know that Soviet Union participated at all in Second World War, right? Nothing to be said that it was Soviet Union that actually defeated Nazi Germany. It was Soviet Union that actually win the war. And US, UK, rest of them, they just somewhat help, just a little bit, right? They wait until 44, by the way, before they open second front. What we are talking about. They open second front when they know perfectly well Soviet Union finished Nazi Germany. And only then Washington and London get involved. And you know why? They wanted to establish control over at least western parts of Europe, and they did it. That's what they did it, and they still are holding this control, right? Until nowadays. So yes, Russian side has every reason to be angry on these developments in the West. UN Secretary General definitely made a massive error if it was not intentional. Although, of course, it was intentional, man. What do you expect? This Gutierrez is a puppet of the Western ruling class, by the way. What do you expect from the puppets? And before I continue, dear friends, let me notice that this small media project of mine, this small independent media project from Russia, is completely subscriber funded, and many thanks to everybody who supported and continues to support this project and my work. And I hope you will continue to support, dear friends, because without you, this project would not exist at all. And if you want to support, dear friends, if you are new to the project, to the channel, you can support with a donation through PayPal or Boosty platforms. Links are on this video description box and in the pinned comment. You can also support by becoming a Patreon for the project. You can subscribe to my Patreon page, for example, or page on Boosty. Links also are on this video description box and in the pinned comment. And you can see their crypto wallet also, in case you are good with this whole crypto stuff. So yes, that's being said, once again, many thanks to everybody, all the members of our community who supported and continues to support. Truly grateful, dear friends. You are giving me opportunity to work in this field of news and political commentary, and you know, I cannot express how happy I am that I managed to come back, at least partially come back to journalism. And I grew up in journalism since the 17th year. You know, my first step in journalism was when I was 17, right? So I spent almost entire my adult life in this field. So truly grateful, dear friends. Thank you. And the TASS News Agency is reporting that on 4th of February, in 2 days' time, US tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and China will be in force. Canada and Mexico will be tariffed 25%, and exports of Canada and Mexico into US. And when it comes to China, I believe it's a 10% tariff for now on China. And well, we are about to witness, by the way, potentially greatest tariff war ever in human history. And well, this receiving side of US tariffs is also reacting. And for example, Trudeau, which is formally still in charge there, Trudeau stated that Canada will impose retaliatory tariffs on US goods for $106.5 billion US dollars. Mexico, by the way, is also threatening that there will be retaliation against US. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum has accused the United States of fueling cartel violence by allowing powerful firearms to flow south, pushing back against President Donald Trump's claims that Mexico is failing to stop illegal migrants and drug trafficking. Sheinbaum commented later Saturday. Sheinbaum's comments late Saturday came as she ordered retaliatory tariffs on U.S. goods in response to Trump's sweeping 25% duties on imports from Mexico and Canada. And well, I mean, it's heating up, isn't it? And seems like this tariff focus on tariffs is Trump's thinker. They want to get rid of deficit in trade, and he thinks this additional tariffs might help it, although I'm not quite sure about it, because look what is happening. US is imposing tariffs on other countries, those other countries retaliating in the same manner, right? Eventually, price is gonna go up inside US, and in these countries, I guess prices will go up just about everywhere as a result of this tariff wars. Ordinary people will lose from it. Although, yes, federal budget of US will gain some more money, at least initially. But if after this tariff wars, or if simultaneously with tariff wars, Washington wouldn't be able to attract huge volumes of investments in manufacturing sector, then I don't think these tariff wars will really work, because US depends on, only way to cut dependence on foreign imports is to have your own manufacturing, right? And at this point, despite all the attempts of Western ruling class to deindustrialize Europe and industrialize US by forcing European manufacturers to move to North America, all these attempts are, they might work eventually, but at this point don't really play crucial role, right? Because reindustrialization of US will take quite some time, and meanwhile, these tariff wars may actually do even more damage to US. I don't know, man. I'm not an economical expert, but in any ways, we are about to witness something big, man. This is for sure. And Trump, by the way, is also threatening to tariff European states. EU, by the way. Trump is about to impose tariffs for Europe also, European states. So yes, unfortunately, it's ordinary people, isn't it, that gonna pay more. And when it comes to, by the way, to go back to statements of Mexican leader, I mean, let's be real here. Like we have to be objective, isn't it? And how Mexican president can say that Mexico is not failing on the border? How Mexican leadership can blame US for drug cartels in Mexico? I mean, what the hell, man? do your job, secure border, deal with these drug cartels. You have an army, you have police, just do it if you can. If you can, then at least don't blame your problems on others, right? I mean, I'm not shying away ever to criticize US, but I don't think it is a US fault that Mexico is run by these cartels, right? It's a fault of Mexican corrupt Mexican government, corrupt Mexican police, corrupt Mexican army. That's how it is, right? So this should be also stated, by the way. Our friends from Mexico can explain. Maybe I'm wrong in my reading of the big picture, but I don't know. I mean, it seems to me that first of all, Mexican government supposed to be responsible for everything in regards to Mexico, and to blame US, by the way, for everything that's going on there. I mean, come on, man. Anyways, let's continue. And China, by the way, also, it's not just Canada and Mexico, but China is also promising retaliatory steps for US tariff war. And in addition, China will complain on US in the World Trade Organization, if that organization even means anything, by the way. It's controlled by US, right, in large. So what you're gonna achieve in US controlled institution or Western controlled institution? I said many times before, by the way, all these Western controlled institutions should be left alone by the rest of the world, right? And so let countries from collective West be part of these organizations and let them talk with each other, by the way, constantly. Why the rest of the world is also playing these nonsensical games? I don't know, but I'm quite sure China will achieve nothing with its complaint in the World Trade Organization, but a whole different story is Chinese tariffs on US goods, right? US are extremely dependent on trade with China, as many other countries do, including Russia, by the way. And so it is not going to be easy for US to really intimidate China. US can intimidate Canada for sure, Mexico, no doubts about that, but China, well, that's a whole different story, man. I don't think US is in a position to intimidate China with some tariffs and stuff, man. No. It will just, all this tariff war will just harm ordinary people, isn't it? And small and medium businesses, because large corporations, they're gonna survive, but small and medium businesses that might have some connections with their partners in different countries, that they might suffer, yes, because their goods and their products or services will become more expensive, right, and potentially unaffordable. Meanwhile, by the way, we have this report that from TASS news agency that France completes their pullout of troops from Chad, which is a good thing. I think it is definitely necessary entire African continent to be decolonized, right? And all former colonies or all former empires that were in charge, that colonized Africa, by the way, many African nations, should be out of this continent forever, right? So yes, and process is underway, by the way. France was holding to its influence in Africa for quite a while, isn't it? But nowadays it seems like new revolution is underway in African nations that were controlled by France, and almost all countries are forcing or already forced French troops out of their territories. Still, Paris has influence, by the way. One should keep in mind that in many cases, it's France that prints money for former colonies. It's France that has immense influence on political elites. But things are changing. Things are changing, and And France seems like France is finally losing its grip on Africa, which is definitely a good thinker. African nations will have opportunity to rebuild their countries and to choose wisely with whom they want to cooperate, which dialogue and cooperation with which countries will be most profitable for people of these nations and for economies of these nations. Meanwhile, by the way, interesting news from RIA Novosti that Ukraine start importing natural gas, obviously from the west. They are receiving now relatively small volumes, just about 200 million cubic meters, right? But this number probably will double in this number not double, but this number will most likely increase tenfold in relatively short time. Also, by the way, reports are that our underground reserves, underground gas storage facilities in Ukraine are on a very low level, and only half what remains in underground storage facilities can be used to supply manufacturing plants or whatever, because another half is needed, this pipeline network to be operational. So situation for Kyiv regime definitely is becoming more and more difficult when it comes to energy sphere, including gas sector. Moldova, by the way, is transferring first volumes of gas to Transnistria after agreement was achieved between the sides. Also, EU is involved in this process. Russia is involved there, obviously, and well, it is good that that this humanitarian crisis that is happening in Transnistria, little by little, but will be resolved. And this crisis began because Kyiv regime shut down its pipeline network, isn't it? And no longer transferring any gas to anywhere, Russian gas, through its territory. And also this crisis in Transnistria, between Moldova and Transnistria, happened due to unwillingness of Moldovan side to acknowledge its debt to Gazprom. Now they are acknowledging that yes, they have to pay some $700 and something million to Gazprom, but for many months, for years actually, Moldova was refusing to pay, right? And eventually this attitude absolutely destroyed relationships between Moldavian gas companies and the Gazprom, and now some steps being made to rebuild trust between the sides, at least a little bit. Also, by the way, when it comes to gas sector, we have this report that Russian gas exports via key Black Sea pipeline hits historical high. This is TurkStream pipeline, obviously. So deliveries of Russian natural gas via the TurkStream pipeline reached a historical high according to data analysis by Reuters, and it occurred when Kyiv shut down transit of the fuel to EU countries via the pipeline that crosses Ukraine. Primarily, calculations released on Friday indicate that Russian gas supplies via the TurkStream exceeded 50 million cubic meters per day in January, marking a 27% year-on-year increase. Supply volumes also rose by 2% compared to a previous month. In total, gas exports via the pipeline reached 1.57 billion cubic meters in January alone, up from 1.24 billion in January 2024. So obviously, understandably so, I mean, European states now trying to use this TurkStream pipeline to receive Russian gas after Kyiv shut down its own pipeline network to transit Russian gas, and I guess TurkStream will operate on maximum of its capacities. I don't think it can increase volume of transit significantly more than 50 million cubic meters in per day. this number might increase just a little bit, but I guess this is about maximum, because obviously this pipeline was not built to compensate for the Nord Stream and Nord Stream 2 pipelines, right? But anyways, this information once again highlights, by the way, how faulty and misleading Brussels is, right? If you ask Brussels bureaucrats, oh, they no longer need any Russian energy, anything from Russia, they no longer want to deal with Russia in any way, shape, or form, and in reality, well, that's the reality, by the way. They are queuing in, EU member states are queuing in to buy some goods from Russia, and in cases when they cannot buy directly, they are buying it anyways through third parties and fourth parties. They just pay more, right? RT is also reporting that Russia and India to ink labor migration deal. So New Delhi and Moscow are actively discussing memorandum of understanding to establish a migration and mobility partnership agreement aiming to facilitate their orderly flow of skilled Indian professionals to Russia, according to Indian ambassador to Russia, Vinay Kumar. The demographic dynamic between India and Russia provide a unique opportunity for mutual benefit, New Delhi's ambassador to Moscow said in an interview with the International Affairs magazine. Kumar emphasized that their move would strengthen bilateral ties and address Russia's workforce challenges. Skilled professionals from India, especially in the fields of information technology, healthcare, and mechanical engineering, can meet Russia's workforce needs and strengthen cooperation, he said. And this is great news, by the way. This is great news, sir. More closer Russia and India will be better for both, obviously. And well, India definitely can help, and Indian society definitely can help Russia. They will benefit themselves, obviously, and also they will help Russia if there will be flow of migration from India of skilled workers. It's a good stuff, by the way. It's a good stuff. And my attitude towards India, dear friends, whenever anything good is happening in regards to India or in relationships between the two countries, I'm happy for that. I see India as our brothers, by the way, our not just strategical partners, but our friends, right? We have to be together, by the way. We have respect to each other. We love each other's culture. We are just too close, by the way, to allow anybody, Western ruling class or anybody else, to destroy these relationships, right? That's my understanding, at least. So yes, good news, obviously, and I will end this update on that, dear friends. I will end this update on that. Hopefully you'll find a relatively long video interesting and useful, and if so, please click that like button, leave some commentary just about anything, any topic. This is the only way we can try at least to deal with the algorithm to allow my videos to reach wider audience that might want to hear about some news from Russia or hear some commentary from Russia, from pro-Russian perspective. And I'm quite sure there is millions and millions of people that really want to hear from Russia, but unfortunately, due to this creepy algorithm, my video will, very rarely end up in recommendations. You can now do some experiment, by the way. Just type in YouTube search news channel from Russia. Just news channel from Russia, and you would think logically that among channels that you will YouTube will recommend, they will be mine also. But I checked it a few days ago, by the way, and I was scrolling, and I didn't see my channel. And I only see like a few channels that might have some connection with Russia. The rest, by the way, is BBC, CNN, Fox News, that kind of stuff. That nothing that have nothing to do with Russia. They are not Russian channels, right? For God's sake. And you are looking for a news channel from Russia, right? That's what you typed in search, but you know, that's the algorithm. Do this experiment, by the way. You will be, it's interesting. Anyways, I'm gonna end this update now. As I said, at 6 o'clock this evening, Moscow time, I will start a traditional Sunday live stream, community chat, and I hope you will find time to join the conversation. This is it for now. Have a wonderful day and take care.